Welcome to the Phoenix Zoo's Digital Safari, where we will be highlighting some digital content at 1 p.m. every day. Today is the first episode of
birthday parties, as well as our shows and impromptu animal discoveries that we hold here at the zoo in our new Dornbos Discovery Amphitheater. Now, the Brazilian Rainbow Boa is definitely extremely striking, and they actually get their name, the Rainbow Boa, because their scales actually have tiny little ridges on them that act like prisms. And some of the surrounding countries, including rainforest, woodland, as well as savanna. And they're rather large boas, growing upwards of 4 to 6 feet, and some have even been known to get as large as 7 feet. They do have some really interesting features on them besides that beautiful, gorgeous color, one of which is their heat sensing pits that they have around their mouth and face. And essentially those help them detect heat from small little rodents that they would like to eat. And they can track them down at nighttime just by feeling and sensing the heat from those warm-blooded bodies that they put off. Also helps with us as well. They like to go to warmer parts on us when it's nice and cool. You might notice he's sticking that tongue of his out, and that's his way of sensing his environment. They have what's called a Jacobson's organ on the roof of their mouth that they utilize to sense all sorts of items, whether it be food, finding shelter, searching for mates, and they flick that tongue out, put it to the roof of their mouth, and then process all of those scents. Now, he is primarily a rodent eater, but snakes like this can swallow anything that's about 2 to 3 times the size of their head. And the way that they do that is their jaw works differently than ours. Instead of being connected together by bones, their jaw is actually connected together by stretchy ligaments. So essentially their mouths can really stretch wide open and be able to swallow whole. The bone also on their chin is not fully connected either. There's actually a little gap there with stretchy skin, and that can stretch open as well, allowing their mouth to expand both sideways and upward. So if you guys were snakes, you guys could actually swallow a watermelon in one single bite, just to give you guys an idea. So he's out here enjoying the sun. They are ectothermic, and essentially that means that they get their body temperature from the heat that surrounds them. So whatever the temperature outside is what his temperature currently is. They have to move in and out of shade or underneath the ground or above ground in order to regulate their temperature. Of course, he's checking everybody out right now. These guys are constrictors. They are not a venomous snake. The easiest way you can tell he's not venomous is I was holding him earlier. I don't get paid enough to hold venomous snakes, so that's definitely the easiest way to tell. But being a constrictor, when he actually does find his prey, he'll bite onto it. They've got about 200 sharp teeth that face backward in their mouth. And because those teeth face backward, they basically act like a trap for that small rodent if it tries to struggle and get away. That gives them enough time to wrap their body around it and squeeze and constrict. Now, scientists used to think that they used to stop the animal from breathing by suffocating them to death, but recent research shows that that's not actually accurate. Instead, what they will do is they will constrict around the heart, stopping the heartbeat and actually effectively killing the animal much faster and more humane than suffocation would do. After they give it that nice little bear hug, then they'll go ahead and use those teeth and all those crazy muscles to swallow that prey whole. Typically, they start at the top of the head of the prey item and work its way down, rather than starting at a leg or something where they might get stuck since they don't have a fork and a knife to help cut it up into one piece, into multiple pieces.
We have a question, how old do they get? How long do they live?
He is actually 18 and a half years old right now, and snakes about this size can live anywhere from about 20 to 30 years in a under human care. In the wild, typically it's a little bit less than that because they have predators, and of course they don't have wonderful vet staff to take care of them as well.
And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Absolutely.
We'll try to get a close-up of the scales for everyone.
So his name is Belo, and Belo actually means beautiful in Portuguese, which is the language that's spoke down where they are found. And of course he gets that name because of those beautiful rainbow colors. And in case you're wondering who our noisy neighbors are, those are the Hyacinth Macaws that are in our new show, the Zoo Academy Awards, which you'll have to check out later as we'll be live feeding that sometime later in the future, so you guys can all watch from home.
Looks like we have a question from Eli, who looks like who is 7 years old. How big can this snake get?
So typically 4 to 6 feet is average for the species in length, and upwards of 7 feet as the longest. Typically for snakes, the females are actually larger than the male. So being a male, he's probably going to be a little bit on the smaller side. When he's fully stretched out, he's probably about 4.5 feet. Although it's hard to get an exact length on a snake that's alive because they move constantly and won't let you get their length. But we do our best.
And speaking of moving on the ground, we have 4.5-year-old Zeke is asking, how do they move on the ground?
That is a fantastic question. So it kind of depends on the snake, but essentially all snakes have really interesting scales on their belly. Let me see if I can show you. They're long and skinny, much different than the scales that are on their back, and they're called scutes. And essentially what they use is they use each of these individual scales almost like an individual foot, where they scoot along one scale, then the next, then the next, then the next, pulling themselves forward or upward or downward, whatever they do. These boas spend a lot of time up in trees, which is what he's kind of mimicking, hanging out here on his little tree perch. And so he's going to spend a lot of time climbing arboreally, although they do spend a lot of time on the ground as well. But whether a snake lives on the ground or up in the trees, those scoots are what allow them to move and scoot along their surface that they're on.
Awesome. And
got another question asking how old.
How old is he? He is about 18.5 years old right now. So, and they can live anywhere from 20 to 30 years under human care, typically a little less when they're out in the wild due to predation.
And then how large are their clutch sizes?
Oh, their clutch, ooh, that's a really good question. Typically, what's actually interesting, they don't actually lay as many because these guys are what we call ovoviviparous, which means that they lay their eggs, but they retain their eggs inside their body, and the females actually give live birth. And so they don't lay the clutch outside and then incubate it like mini snakes. They actually do ultimately give live birth. So typically these guys will only have about 4 to 6 babies at a time.
let's see, can they swim? Emmy, age 5, is asking if they could swim.
All snakes can swim. Most of them don't like to. So he's fully capable of swimming if he wants to do so, but that's not going to be his primary means of getting around.
All right. Keep those questions coming, you guys.
So sitting on this tree perch here and coming out in the sun is a form of behavioral enrichment for the snakes. It allows them basically to come outside, smell new things, see new things, be exposed to new things. Super important, especially during this time, to keep our animals happy and healthy, is to provide very enriching environments in order to promote species-specific natural behaviors. And so that's something that we always strive for here at the Phoenix Zoo, to keep all of our animals happy and healthy, gives them great exercise, but also stimulates them mentally as well, which is very important too.
Are they bigger or smaller than anacondas?
They are much smaller than anacondas. So anacondas are one of the largest snake species in the world. They are the heaviest snake species, sometimes growing upwards of 300 pounds, and have known to get well over 20 feet in length. Would not be able to hold an anaconda by myself. That takes a lot more strength. So definitely smaller than an anaconda.
And what do they eat?
They primarily eat all sorts of rodents, mainly mice and rats, but living in the rainforest, they would be able to go after things like bird eggs, some amphibians like frogs and salamanders, maybe even some small lizards and even other snakes, but their favorite is going to be the small, warm, fuzzy rodents that they like to eat, which is actually really important for our environment because rodents can actually carry a lot of diseases and destroy a lot of human crops, so they do a really good job in pest control, natural pest control for us.
I've had a few questions on how you can tell if the gender, if it's a boy or a girl.
We cannot tell just by looking at him whether it's a boy or girl. You can either do DNA testing or something called probing. You guys can imagine what that entails in order to determine. Sometimes size can help us out a little bit because normally females are larger than the males of the species, but you can also have a small female or a large male, so it's sometimes a little difficult to tell that way.
What countries are they found?
They're found in Brazil, Suriname, Guyana, and Venezuela. Typically found throughout the Amazon basin area of South America.
We have Landon, age 7, wants to know where they sleep.
Typically on the ground, nestled up in kind of bushes or underneath fallen logs or things like that that are going to be nice and safe and not exposed. So definitely want to stay safe from all their predators, because living in a rainforest, there's a lot of them.
And then, do snakes get along with other types of snakes? We have a question there.
Typically not so much. Snakes are very solitary animals and they can get fairly territorial. So unless it's breeding season, they're typically going to stay away from one another.
So we have Eddie, age 9, wants to know, how big are the baby snakes?
It depends. I don't know this particular species, but normally when they're born, they're normally just a couple inches long. They look like tiny little worms, not much thicker than a pencil when they're born.
How long do the babies stay with their mom after being born?
They normally don't spend much time with their mom at all. After they are born, they tend to kind of disperse on their own. They've got the natural instinct and normally start hunting within about a week or 2 of their lives. Snakes actually don't eat that often. We only actually offer food to our snakes once a week, and a lot of times they actually don't want it at all during that time. A snake can go sometimes upwards of a couple months without eating at all, depending on how large their last meal was. So they don't actually need a lot of care from their parents. Now this is the Brazilian Rainbow Boa, but there are actually about anywhere, it's disputed, between 9 to 12 subspecies of rainbow boas that are found throughout South America. So this is what I consider one of the most striking, because they've got that reddish coloration with that beautiful black pattern on them. Others kind of are more of a brown color, but all of them are known for having those ridges on their scales, which act like prisms and refract the light, giving them that kind of rainbow iridescence.
Are they born with the same color that they have as an adult?
Yes, they are born as babies looking identical to how they do as adults. They just get larger as they grow older.
So I think, Rebecca, that answered your question a little bit about why they have the circle patterns on there.
Yeah, they've got something called counter shading camouflage. So essentially they're very dark on the top of their bodies and very light on their underbellies, which actually allows them to camouflage better in a rainforest environment. Because if you were a predator looking down from the tops of the trees, they're darker and blend in more with the dark forest floor. Whereas if you're a predator looking up and they happen to be climbing in trees, they're much lighter on their bellies. So they basically blend in with the sun streaming through all of the branches. And so that helps them to camouflage that coloration and pattern.
How fast can they travel on the ground?
Not very fast. They're not super fast, especially over distances. Snakes are very quick over striking distance in order to strike out at their prey, but traveling over long distances, they're not going to go too fast.
How much do they weigh? Zoe, age 10, wants to know.
Belo here is about 2 pounds. I'm sure they could get upwards of maybe about 3 pounds, but they're not the heftiest snakes out there. They're kind of long, skinny, and athletes.
So we actually have a question for you, Emily.
Yes.
Mateo, age 5, wants to know what your favorite thing to do at the zoo is.
My favorite thing to do at the zoo, I love doing the shows at the zoo. We actually just debuted our brand new show, the Zoo Academy Awards, last weekend. It was fantastic, so much fun, had a blast, and we'll be showing it to you guys soon on one of these live feeds. So stay tuned to see our new show, the Zoo Academy Awards.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Belo. We will be featuring some other hidden gems in future broadcasts of our digital safari at 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. If there are some hidden gems that are your favorites at the zoo and you would like to see us feature them, feel free to comment and we will do our best to feature some of your favorite hidden gems. We have a nice list of hidden gems we want to share with you, but if there's some that you would like us to share, feel free to comment. And again, thank you all for supporting the Phoenix Zoo. We really hope to see you soon. And thanks again, everyone.